Hello, welcome to ACI Controls. Today we're back in the fabrication shop to try to finish putting the upper sections on this frame. And these pieces right here, I got them tacked together, and those will be supporting the heat exchanger. Since it is a pretty light heat exchanger, I don't have to get carried away on framing. Some are heavier ones, 3,000 pounds, just so you got to do a little more elaborate reinforcing, but this one's going to be pretty straightforward. So let me go ahead and prep the frame and start putting these pieces on there, and I'll start tacking them together. So this U-shaped bracket is going to be what holds the head of the heat exchanger in place. So they're all squared up and level, and it's critical to have all that stuff straight and level and square. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem. So I'll get this tacked together and then we'll move on. So it's now tacked in place, and so I'll go back through and double check to make sure it held and didn't tilt a little bit. Sometimes you gotta give it a little fine tuning before you bring in the other sections. Anything a hammer can't fix? I don't think so. So now I got some bracing in place that I can use to bring the L-shaped piece in there that holds the rest of the heat exchanger. We'll get that in place next. So stainless can be a real horrendous pain to deal with when it comes to distortion, even on these heavier sections. So when I put these sub-assemblies together, I'll just lightly tack it, just enough to hold together until I get it in position, and then tie it in together, and then I'll start welding it securely. And if you know how to deal with the distortion, how to read it, you can usually use it to your advantage to get things where you want them to be. But a lot of times you kind of have to get a little elaborate in how you pull stuff into position, and where you put the tacks. A lot of times you get the tacks to pull apart where you need it to be. So like in a case like this where I'm having issues going this way, I will get it secured. I will lightly tack it down in this corner, where if I wasn't having issues with it tipping back and forth, I would have come in and put a weld on over here and one over here, so this can't tip back and forth. But in this case I had to put a strap on there, tack it in place, and then I would go through and finish securing the tacks, make sure everything's still straight, and then go through and alternate when I put the welds in, so I don't force it to pull one way or the other. And then after that's done, then the real hard part is to put in the hold loop, which is much thinner gauge material, and that's where distortion really starts to be a problem. I now have all the hold loop frame lightly tacked together and put in place, and at this point I have to go through and put a lot of bracing on here and clamp it up good and solid to try to control the distortion, because the way this mounts on here, it's tough to get in there without it distorting, especially over here on this particular vertical column. Start welding up in this face and on this face, this whole beam, it just turns into a banana. So I put a lot of bracing on there, and I'll go through and get a lot of this welded up pretty secure, and then I will leave this section, I'll get it tacked, but I'll leave it to the end to weld. I'll come in, I'll put the fork truck right up tight to the back here, clamp it down, and then get up on there with a winch and actually pull the frame all the way back up until this side of it here tips up in the air, and that's usually enough pressure on that, enough backwards pull on the this assembly here, and then I'll weld that up. And once I free everything up, it usually ends up straight up and down. So that'll be the next stage, is to get this welded up, and then we'll get the fork truck hooked in there and see how that goes. So now I have most of the base welded in place, and now I'm getting ready to put in this weld right here. And it's always a problem doing it because it wants to distort really bad. So you can see I got braces tied up on both those vertical pieces, and then I have the top chain back to the fork truck and pulled over, and the front is actually lifted up, and I have to preload it that much and brace it as well to try to keep that from distorting. And even that, I'm a little iffy on this one because this frame is pretty light, and so I don't know if it's got enough counterweight to actually hold up, but put it together and see what happens. So it's now welded up solid, and if I wanted to put any support, any preload on that, I'd have to put a Cheektowaga sticker on the side of it because it would be a banana. And I mean, it really curls up a lot. So it actually held up quite a bit better than I was anticipating, because there wasn't a lot of weight off the front of the frame to counter it, but apparently it's enough because it held up. It's nice and straight. I don't see any issues with it at all. The other side's not that big of a deal to weld. Once you get it tacked on and get welds placed on this side of it, then you're pretty much good to go. And so that's still nice and straight there. So I just got to finish welding it, and then the next thing is put the motor plates on, and then an outer cage. The core of the frame now is all welded up solid, and now I got to put these pipes are part of the outer cage that you use as kind of a somewhat decorative, with a little bit of protection around it. And by far they are the most aggravating part to put on here, but put them on anyhow. So these will not have any product in them, and they're sealed up to the atmosphere once they're welded on, so I do not do any back purge on these, but I still do weld them up on the lathe, and I do use filler wire when doing these because they do have a bit of a bevel on there. And so I'll put this in the lathe and weld them up, and then they get welded onto the frame. And then there's some cross pieces get put in place, and some verticals get put in to tie everything together, and that's where the electrical enclosure will get attached. So let's head to the lathe. pipes are all now welded up on the elbows anyhow. And then in order to join the two sides together, I have this rather crude fixture that does work. And it puts this assembly together. There's two of these that go up on the machine and they get tied together. So at this point I'll go through and tack all this together, set it aside, build the other one, and then I put the two of them together on the fork truck and set them in place and then start attaching them to the machine. I'm now in the process of setting these outer cage pipes in place. Those will get welded down in there, and then the cross pieces will get notched, which is always a very unpleasant experience. And then they'll all get welded in. Here's where I set up to notch the pipes so they can interconnect fairly seamlessly. And so I just use this hole saw and this notching fixture. Usually one hole saw per machine, because it's pretty harsh on, even with the carbide ones, and a lot of oil and slow going in, and still eats up the blades. But unfortunately I'm out of hole saw, so I have to use this worn out one. See how far I get. Stick around, should be interesting. Well, one benefit of having a dull blade, at least it doesn't grab the part, slam my hand into the frame, so that's always good. But then this will get a notch on the other end, and make several more pipes like this, and then they'll be cleaned up, degreased thoroughly, and welded in place. The frame is now all assembled, and I just gotta go through and do some final welds on it, and then it'll get sent out to be bead blasted. And then when it goes back, I'll be putting that whole loop I built earlier and what's in that mystery box up there. So then the electrical box will be mounted right on those two posts right there. And the heat exchanger goes up on that part, and the whole loop goes off of that assembly there.